How do you think that countries like the UK and other European countries should treat returnees essentially from ISIS, from Syria?
Well, this is a question that should be divorced from this idea of sympathy which she asked for. This is simply about balancing risks and responsibilities, and those are lawful responsibilities, not to make people like Shamima stateless. So this is also about security. I mean, some European countries had taken a fairly lenient stance on young women that had gone off to ISIS wanting to return, thinking that they were less of a security. Actually, that's been addressed in recent years, and now young women are also being seen as a threat. But the important thing is to assess each case individually. Young women were not, generally speaking, picking up arms in Syria and Iraq. Doesn't mean that they didn't support violence, but it does mean that we need to look and assess each person individually as they come back, carry out the necessary investigations, potentially carry out a prosecution. It's absolutely got nothing to do with sympathy for Shamima or anybody like her.
Is there a concern that if the UK allows these fighters and the ancillary supporters with them to return, that they could slip into society and then perhaps radicalise others? How easy is it for them to be held to account once they return to their countries of origin?
Well, in a case, it's actually happened already. So it's not as if Shamima is the first case. She might be a high-profile case, and she might be somebody that people have particularly strong thoughts about. But we already have had people return. They're met with a multi-agency approach. So that means that there is a police response, a social services response, a mental health providing response. In the case of children returning, there's a safeguarding response. So there's a variety of different agencies involved. Now, Shamima is obviously a high-profile case. There's no slipping through. In fact, almost half of those that went over to Iraq and Syria from the UK have already returned. And some of them were returning even in 2015 when people like the Bethnal Green girls were going over to join Daesh. So this isn't something that is entirely new. It is something.
Although the laws have had to change. There's a new counter-terrorism and border security bill that's been given royal assent. It's not come into force yet. Does that highlight the difficulties with actually securing evidence against returning fighters?
It does, and that has exactly been that law will come into effect in order to make prosecution easier, because that's about being in a designated area rather than the difficulty of accumulating evidence. Specific evidence about what particular crimes people were involved in. Yes, that's exactly what that's about.
Is there a sense overall? I mean, the Metropolitan Police, in the case of these Bethnal Green girls, said at the time that they ought to be treated as victims. They were 16 years old when they went away. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that the Met at the time admitted that there had been some mistakes made. If you remember, there was a girl from the school who'd previously travelled. There were letters given to the girls that were meant for the parents that never got to the parents, warning about threats. So there were mistakes admitted to back then, and that was the context of that suggestion that they would be treated as victims. It's really complicated, this question of agency. Who's the victim and who's not in these cases?